How and when did the Summa replace the sentences as the standard theology textbook?
There is not one, there's not one date when that happened. It happens. It depends really on. It depends on geographic considerations. So I'll give you an example. An extreme example would be when the University of Mexico City was founded in, I think, if I remember correctly, 1688, but 17th century, and I think it's the 1680s. The theology faculty stipulates use of Peter Lombard's Book of Sentences as a theology textbook. So we're now at the end of the 17th century, and Peter Lombard gets stipulated as a textbook in the colonies. Okay, so the turning point is the Council of Trent. It's because Thomas Aquinas was so central at the Council of Trent as a kind of theological authority that in the wake of the Council of Trent, more and more seminaries and universities, study houses of religious orders, although study houses of religious orders, of course, an interesting case, began to use the Summa theology. I'm saying the study houses of religious orders are an interesting case because, to give you one example, the Franciscans never made the move to Thomas Aquinas as their textbook. They always stayed with Alexander of Hales or Bonaventure, that is to say, with the Franciscan tradition. So you see, so one has to make a lot of distinctions. So Thomas Aquinas becomes a very, very important source, but he doesn't become the only textbook.
I see. And so eventually, maybe when he's the Leonine, declaration of Thomas as the universal doctor, maybe that's when he gains this kind of universal status in church law as well as de facto. Seminarians are to be given a Thomistic formation and that kind of.
Certainly, you're right. Aeternam Patris was a turning point there. Though one should say again, Thomas Aquinas wasn't. So one of the things that happened immediately after Aeternam Patris is that Pope Leo founded the Leonine Commission in order to create a modern edition of the works of Thomas Aquinas, so the Leonine edition, which, by the way, is still in progress. That shows you. By the way, the reason why the Leonine edition is still in progress is that the volumes that appeared initially, that is to say at the very end of the 19th century, were not really up to the standards of a modern critical edition, so that they all have to be redone. And since Thomas Aquinas is so influential, it's extremely difficult to locate all the relevant manuscripts with all the variants that they may contain and to actually arrive at critical editions of the writings of Thomas Aquinas. So it's a real, it's a massive piece of work that's being done there, and that's still continuing. But what I was trying to say is this: so Aeternam Patris comes out. It does, I don't have the text in front of me right now, but it certainly recommends the study of Thomas Aquinas as a very, very important source. I don't think it says that other theologians are ruled out.
No.
But we'd have to look at the text. But at any rate, then the Leonine Commission begins to publish the collected works of Thomas Aquinas in a modern critical edition. At that point, the Collegium Sancti Bonaventure in Grottaferrata, just outside of Rome, begins a critical edition of the works of Bonaventure, just to make sure that this Thomistic project doesn't completely overshadow the Franciscan tradition and the Bonaventurian project. So you see, but it is true then that Thomas then kind of dominates theology from the time of Aeternam Patris up to the Nouvelle Theologie. That is the likes of de Lubac and of Chenu and the French school, who then becomes very influential in the Second Vatican Council. By the way, together with Ratzinger.
Yes.
So Ratzinger also is an anti-Thomist.
Right.
And remained one throughout his papacy. I mean, that's very, very clear from the writings from his doctoral dissertation and from his second doctoral dissertation, which were written before the Second Vatican Council. He devotes those to Augustine and to Bonaventure in order to avoid Thomas. So it's an interesting debate.